Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Must Be in Writing. I worked part-time at Home Depot while in high school back in the late 90s. After dealing with a horrible manager for a long time, I finally had enough and told her that at the end of the current schedule I was going to be quitting. She said, "I need that in writing, you'll need to bring in a letter." To which I told her I didn't have a computer at home. Can I use one of the ones here? "No, you'll have to go to the library or find some other way." I asked again if there was any way they could just let me use one of the store computers and was told, "It's your responsibility to figure this out on your own personal time." Sure, no problem. I pulled my pen and notepad out of my apron. This was a summer Saturday afternoon at the checkout, so lots of people were around, and proceeded to write my resignation letter. "Dear Tammy, I quit, effective immediately." Took my apron off and walked out. She was so shocked she just stood there and couldn't come up with anything to say. I heard from a few people about a year later that it was still being talked about. The next story is called Mow the Lawn. In college I rented a house with a couple of roommates. We probably should have looked into the landlord a bit further before renting. But it was a bit of a small college town, where the college had outgrown the available housing, so we were desperate for whatever we could get. Shortly after signing the lease, a family member sent me an article about what a slumlord the landlord was. But there wasn't much to do about it at that point. In the end, they were slow and cheap about fixing things, but they pretty much left us alone, unlike some of the other college town landlords. So it wasn't too bad. The house had a small backyard. I believe that the yard had once contained a lawn. But one of the consequences of the landlords refusing to put any time or money into the place was that, when we moved in, the whole backyard was just a sea of tall weeds. This didn't really bother us, so we just left it. But apparently it bothered one of our neighbors, because they went out to our landlord, who sent us a letter telling us that, according to the lease, it was our responsibility to take care of it. I feel a bit bad for the neighbor here, because they did have to live near this eyesore, but we didn't create the problem. And we didn't feel like it was our job to do something about it. So we took a look at the lease and found that it said, "It is the tenant's responsibility to mow the lawn." After spending some time thinking about this, we came to the conclusion that what we had couldn't rightly be called a lawn. And the lease only specified that we were responsible for mowing the lawn. So we sent back a letter saying, "We would be happy to mow the lawn if you would provide us with one. We really didn't want to have to mow our lawn. We didn't have a mower, and I'm sure that the landlord would not have provided us with one." But by that point we had become familiar with how cheap and lazy they were. And we bet that they would rather ignore our neighbor than either argue with us about it or replace the weeds with a lawn. And we appear to have been correct, because we lived there for probably another 3.5 years and we never heard another word about it. The third story is called Turn It Off. I drive for Uber in the Dallas area and I received a ride request. I picked up the gentleman and it was a good ride. About 5 minutes in, the rider asked me what was on my rearview mirror. I told him it was my interior cam. He got mad and told me to turn it off, because he didn't like such surveillance. I reminded him that the Uber app would have said there was video recording. There are also signs on the door. He could have declined to book the trip if there was a problem. It escalated when he yelled, "You better turn that thing off, or else." "Or else?" I asked. "Yes," was the reply. "Turn it off or stop this trip." I verified with him his request and he said, "Yes, turn the thing off or end this trip." To which I said, "Fine, have it your way, I will comply." At that I exited the highway and pulled into a convenience store. He acted a bit stunned before shouting, "What the heck are you doing?" I calmly stated, "You said either I stop recording or I end the trip. As I have no intention of stopping the recording, I am letting you out here." That did not go well for him as he started screaming. I calmly ended the trip as per his request. When ending the trip on the app, I gave him a 1-star rating, as we can't give a 0. As he really was getting on my last nerve, I added feeling unsafe and abusive rider. As he continued to rant, I pointed to a police car that just pulled in and told him, "If you don't leave my car immediately, then perhaps you might want to explain why not to that nice officer." After getting a few more cutting jabs and getting out, he tossed his open protein drink at my head, hitting the headrest and spilling it all over the floorboard. It was at that time I got a text message from Uber support asking if I was alright. I said I was. They told me his account was suspended and asked if I could send a video clip to him. I said I would and also mentioned the mess. Uber support told me to just send him a picture and he would be charged a $75 cleaning fee, which I got within an hour. If he would have just left, I wouldn't have done a thing, but play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The last story is called 30 Minutes. Been almost a year since I quit, but I used to work at PetSmart. Over a couple of years, I worked my way up to the pet care department. Part of the duties in pet care was opening and or closing, depending on when you came in. I was the morning person, so I opened. Most stores had a lot to do. You would have all sorts of animals to care about and also an entire wall of fish, plus the animals that were sick, plus the new arrivals in their own zone. All those would need to be fed, watered and medicated if necessary. Plus you had to do a deep clean of certain habitats on specific days of the week. Corporate policy was opening duties would take only 30 minutes. Unreasonable is the kindest thing to call that. I had one boss who understood that wasn't feasible with the numbers of animals we had, so she didn't care if we took longer, so long as it got done. But the pressure from corporate over other stuff made her leave, and so we got a new boss. He did what new management likes to do and started implementing changes. One of them was cracking down on the time we spent opening the pet care area. We tried to explain that when opening the store with only 2 people, it wasn't possible. But he insisted that corporate knew what they were talking about and we were being lazy, and if we didn't want a write-up, we would do better. Okay, I wasn't going to neglect the animals, naturally, but I didn't want to be written up. So in order to crunch, I skimped on the most visible and time-consuming task: cleaning. Stinky bedding was scattered on the sales floor by the display cages and piled in a corner in the back room outside other areas. The cart we used for the food and water was a mess as well, covered in water spills and open containers of freeze-dried bugs left sitting out in the open. None of the glass for the display cages was cleaned either, covered in smudges both animal and human based. The boss wasn't happy when he came in at 9 and saw the pet care area in this state, but my manager confirmed that I completed my work in 30 minutes. Although he threatened to write me up if I pulled the stunt again, I wasn't bothered about the time it took to complete my opening duties after that. I left 2 months after the new boss arrived and no longer work in pet retail. I hear my old store is still struggling with being understaffed. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories in today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.